Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh, Robb, and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey. Welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. I am Austin Wilson, research analyst at Hicks & Zerker Capital Management.
And I'm Josh Robb, Director of Wealth Management at Hicks & Zerker Capital Management.
And I'm Maddy Miller from The Maddy Miller Show. And today we are doing a collaborative podcast, which is so exciting. All right. So this is the Josh Robb portion of this podcast collaboration. Josh, thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to hear more about your story, your experience, and honestly, mostly your fun fact, which I have all of my guests do.
All right. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It is, fun to share about how I got to where I'm at and kind of the experiences I've had and talk to some people out there that may be interested in finance and being a financial advisor. So I'm happy to be here. I always struggle with the fun fact. I feel like I'm a pretty boring person. And so I kind of think around it and I'm like, man, I don't know what is fun about me, and I think it's because I take this for granted is I am left-handed. And that's may have known that having worked with me, but it's a fun fact in that you're a part of a smaller group of people that have something different, which is fine. And what's more interesting is a couple of things. One is I'm one of 5 kids in my family. So growing up, I'm one of 5 kids. You know that, some of my family. 4 of the 5 of us are left-handed.
Wow.
Which from a statistic standpoint, is just kind of weird.
Yeah.
And the fact that neither of my parents are left-handed seems crazy. That's how it worked out. So that's something I always grew up around. So again, it just didn't seem unusual to me because everybody around me was left-handed from my sibling standpoint, pretty much, besides the one outlier.
Yeah.
But, and it's rare that it really impacts me, but there are instances. And one of the biggest instances is Christmas.
Oh, Christmas.
It is hard being a left-handed person during Christmas. And here's why. You do a lot of wrapping. And more often than not, when you pick up a pair of scissors, they are not left-handed scissors.
Yep.
And if you've ever tried, and this is a true fact because I have a pair of left-handed scissors now. And every once in a while, my wife, who's right-handed, will pick them up to cut, and she complains within 3 minutes.
Oh, and does it make you feel
like, it hurts. It hurts your hand. Yeah. Because the shape, the way your finger rests in there, it pushes against the bottom of your thumb. And so as you're cutting wrapping paper over and over and over and over, it starts to really bug me if I don't have left-handed scissors. So that's when I notice the most that being left-handed is different.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have your own scissors. I remember being in school and our teachers asking is anyone left-handed? We have special scissors for you. And as a child, I totally was like, wait, why? That makes no sense. But now it makes sense.
Try a pair of left-handed scissors and just see what we deal with on an everyday basis.
Okay, I will. That's a good action step that's coming from this podcast already.
There you go.
Okay, well, I'm super excited to just hearing more of your story. So the first question I kind of almost always ask people is, where did you grow up and what did you do for fun in school and during your teenage years? And this is especially fun for me to even ask because one fun thing about Josh and I is we were actually neighbors growing up.
Yes.
So
where did I grow up? Down the street from you. That's
literally down the street. So that was a fun connection to have before I even worked at Hicks & Zerker. But let's hear it.
All right. So yes, I grew up in Findlay, Ohio. What you may not know is I was actually born in Savannah, Georgia.
Wow.
So I was born down in Georgia, but I moved up. I was a baby. My family moved up to Ohio when I was a year old. I've really spent my life growing up in Ohio. So that's what I call home. So what I do for fun growing up, I did a lot of sports. I enjoyed sports. Nice. So I played baseball and soccer, just about anything, basketball, football, anything we could play outside. We were outside all the time playing. So that was what I did for fun most of my young age. And I still do to today. I don't do as much of some of those sports, but I still am involved now that I'm older in more adult sports. But that was kind of the big thing for me growing up. Having a bunch of siblings helps. And I was homeschooled for a while. So from 4th grade through 11th grade, I was homeschooled. And so I enjoyed that. I look back, I'm glad I did that. But I had, 4 other people that were homeschooled as well. So it wasn't lonely. Sometimes when people think about homeschooling, they're like, oh, you're just there. Well, I had my siblings, which is great, but we also were involved in a network. And so we did a lot of things together. And so there actually was a bowling alley in town that let us bowl a couple times a month as a group. So there was probably 30 or 40 kids that were homeschooled in the area that would get together. The YMCA had a gym class that we got together for. There was a drama teacher that did drama. There was a band teacher that did orchestra and band. So in all, I didn't feel like I missed out on any of that socialization stuff. Mm-hmm. And then again, being involved in sports was another aspect to, be connected. So when I think back as a kid, what I did for fun, it was just, hanging out and enjoying that time with people.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. That is so fun. So kind of transitioning into after your childhood, you went to Huntington University, which is actually just kind of down, not too far from where I went to college, Taylor University. But I'm curious.
They're semi-rivals in certain things.
In sports and whatnot. But yes. And I actually was considering Huntington on my college search. Yeah. So yeah. But I'm curious on your end, how did you pick going to Huntington first? And then how did you decide on a major during to go to college?
Great questions. I'm trying to remember how I picked Huntington. I knew I wanted to find a Christian school to attend. Mm-hmm. And so I did start, and I think I just toured. I think I went to Taylor and Indiana Wesleyan and Huntington. Those are some of the schools close in that area, and just kind of looked at those different options. There were some people I knew that had gone to Huntington that really enjoyed it, had a great experience. And so that helped too. There were some people from our church that I just knew had a good experience there. So that's what drove me there. And when I visited, one of the things that really stuck out, even to this day, that I remember when you kind of do your campus tour at Huntington in particular, I remembered that as we were walking, people said hi. They, not just to us, but to the student that was leading us. And it stuck out to me how friendly everybody was. And that's probably true on a lot of smaller campuses that most people. It was one of the things that just as I was thinking through all my visits that stuck out. It was one of those where it was very open and friendly, and that drew me there.
That's awesome.
So when I went my freshman year, I was actually an education major. I was planning on being a teacher. Midway through my freshman year, I kind of had a change in plans, decided that maybe it wasn't what I wanted to do. As I started talking with some of the older kids in that major and even some adults, the politics that sometimes shows up in teaching when it comes to schools within structure of teachers, there was just a lot of movement between hierarchies and just stuff that kind of, I just heard a lot of complaints about it. And I thought, I don't know, that seems kind of maybe not as ideal as I was picturing. And so I switched to be a business major. It was business management was my major. And then I had a minor in small business entrepreneurial and also a minor in accounting. I enjoyed it. It was great education experience. No matter what you end up going into, I think there's certain aspects of that everybody should have. And I took some of it for granted. And when I moved back from Indiana to Ohio, I was talking with the university and they were looking for help on resumes. I'm like, don't they learn that in their class? And I didn't realize that unless you're a business major, you may not have a class on interviews and resumes and all that. And so that's something, I think certain majors maybe could add into their curriculum, as I kind of took for granted some of the things I was learning in my classes from a business standpoint that maybe everybody might need or use.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of feel the same way. Like I was really blessed to go to Taylor, and I went to Taylor's a liberal arts school, which means that like you had to take a lot of gen ed classes that were like in other majors. And I always found like, of course, at the time I was like, that's so annoying, but I actually found it really helpful because there are a lot of aspects of different fields that are important just for, I don't know how to better say, like the average person. So, I'm the same. Huntington's the same way. And there was a lot of classes that it was kind of like, I have to do that. And then you look back and thought, well, that was actually helpful. I see why they do that. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, I was actually going to ask you as the next question, like when you think back on your college days, what projects you did or organizations you were involved in that really made one of the biggest impacts on you? And this doesn't even have to be like within your major, just stuff you did.
I would say one of the biggest ones was I was an RA for a little while. So I was in charge of a floor of guys. And so that would have been my junior year. And I didn't start the year actually as an RA. I was on that floor. And there were some things and that RA had to leave that happened. And so there was an opening. The resident director, who's in charge of all the RAs, reached out to me and was like, hey, would you be interested or consider this? So I went and we did an interview and we talked, and it turned out, it worked out, and I did. And I really appreciate that. It was the floor I was on, there was quite a few international students that were there, and that just ended up being, they all picked to be on the same floor, and I was on that floor with them. And so I got to know them real well. We had been playing soccer together, and they were friends of ours from the last couple of years. And so my roommate and I, we already knew them, but I was like, what's this going to do if I'm now become the person in charge? What if I have to punish them, do all these things? Is that going to affect my friendship with them? So that was something I had to learn how to navigate between having authority and being in charge and also having a relationship. And so that's carried over to now when I have coworkers and people that I'm, responsible or supervisor for. How do I maintain a good relationship with them, but also maintain that sense of supervision? And so that was something, looking back on, I love that time. I enjoyed that experience, but I also feel like I learned a lot from it.
What a great thing to carry on to, even just like so many years later, still applying those leadership lessons. That's awesome. In preparation for this episode, I was doing a little LinkedIn stalking, just
That's
like
probably really bad.
But yours was great. I liked looking at all your different experiences and stuff. I thought what was interesting is, right now you mentioned you're a financial advisor, but right after college, you did not go right into financial advising. So what did those first few years out of college look like? Yeah.
So like I mentioned, I was a business major, and I remember talking to one of my professors, as we were getting close to graduating, and he's like, well, what are you thinking of doing? Because business is pretty wide. There's a lot of things you can do. And I said, well, I've always wanted to help people with their money. And that was kind of what I was looking at doing. And he's like, great. And we kind of walked through what the different careers look like and those type of things. And then a little while after that, I got a letter from a friend of mine who had graduated before me, a year before me. And he said, hey, I'm working for this nonprofit. It's called Youth for Christ. And we're going to probably be hiring close to when you're graduating. Is that something you would consider? Because him and I had done some student ministry stuff together while we were at Huntington. We had volunteered together at a church youth group. And so he had known some of the things that I'd done and enjoyed doing. So he'd reached out to me and said, hey, would that be something you'd be interested in doing? Heading into my senior year, my wife and I had just gotten engaged at the time. She is younger than me, so she still had 2 years left to finish school. And so we were talking about whether we'd stay in the area. She also was at Huntington, or move, if I got a job somewhere, kind of working through that. And this happened to be just a little bit away from Huntington. So it was close enough where we could be in the area and she could finish up school. And so we talked through that. And I just felt really called into that ministry. It was something that I had been a part of as a kid. I had been in that ministry myself through the programs in Ohio. And so I was familiar with it. I knew they did a great job. And I went there, did some interviews, and they ended up offering me a job. So for about 9 years, I was with Youth for Christ, and I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was a great organization, still is. In fact, I'm now serve on the board here locally for it. So I'm still involved, but just in a different aspect than I had been. But it was an adjustment. You have to raise support for it. So it's similar to like a missionary type of thing, depending on where you're at, how much you raise. Each place is a little different, but that was part of, coming out of college and then trying to get funding for getting into that ministry was a new challenging thing to do, but it all worked out. And like I said, I really enjoyed that. It also, when it comes to what I do now, you see a lot of the impact of good or poor financial decisions, because some of the families that we worked with were families that have struggled, and you could see that kind of generational decisions causing some of those impacts. I distinctly remember a kid, we were talking afterwards, and he was saying, I don't know if I can get a hold of my mom because I don't know if our phones are active this month or not, because she may have had to pay the heat bill this month, so we may not have phones. And like the decisions on what utilities they pay versus what they have, and some of those things, and then it broke my heart, because here's a middle schooler having to deal with some of these things as ramifications of decisions the parents were making. Or another one, a high school student, she had to work a job so that she could pay for the utilities at her home because her mom just wasn't doing what needed to be done. And so you think of the maturity level that person had to jump to and miss some of that stuff you do growing up because you had to be more responsible. So some of that drove me into now what I do is helping families make those decisions. Having seen that motivates me to help people make the right decisions and build that legacy for their generations to teach them how to manage money and to make the right decisions.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear. I love when people talk about their career paths as like not like leaving a job and then going into a different one, rather than like seeing how their job grew them into the position that they're now in, which that's such a cool connection. So you mentioned your job right now, which you work at Hicks & Zerker Capital Management, and you've worked there for over 9 years, right?
Yep. I started in 2013. So I'm in my 10th year now. And yeah, it's been great. When I first started there, I did financial advising, which is helping people create a plan for their investing and their whole financial life. I also spent a lot of time doing research, so picking the investments. And so when you are talking with Austin, that's his role. And so when I first started, so when I first started, we were a lot smaller firm. I was Adam and Tony are the Hicks & Zerker. They're the ones that started the firm. I was their first full-time hire. And so there was the two of them, myself, 2 other part-time people. And now we're a team of 12 plus an intern. It's growing. And so I kind of did 2 different roles for a while as we were growing. And then as we got bigger, they said at one point, okay, Josh, you can choose. Do you want to be a full-time research analyst or a full-time financial planner? Either one, your choice. You've done both. And I took some time to think through it and kind of look back and forth. And the more I thought about it, I enjoy helping people make those decisions and come up with a plan. And so that was kind of what drew me that direction. And so, Austin will be able to share how he went that other route, and they're both great and they're both a lot of fun. But for me, that was the interaction with people, I think, was the piece that I was really drawn towards and helping people that way.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And I mean, I know just from being an intern and knowing people that you're a great financial advisor, which is just always needed and really special to have. I'm curious, financial advising, what is your favorite part and your least favorite part?
So when it comes to like the financial advising, my favorite part, I think, is the retirement planning, because it helps people get a dream. Like, what do I want? Like, what is the ideal? And then helping them make a plan to get there. So I think I really like that. The thing that's probably my least favorite, and it probably has just more to do with my comfort level, is estate planning. I'm not an attorney. We help people with their estate plan, kind of help work through that with them. But the attorneys are the ones that are the experts in that, and they draft it. So of all those pieces that I'm comfortable with, I think that's the one that, I always defer to the attorney to say, hey, you know what, they're the experts on that one. But it's something that's essential, needs done. And I always want to make sure that people are doing the right thing. But that's probably the one where, from a comfort level, that's where I kind of defer to the experts.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know nothing about either one of those. So that sounds hard, boss. Awesome. So I saw that you have your certified financial planner license, which you got in 2019. That's something when I was an intern that I didn't know, that like people have to like get these certifications and licenses in order to give financial advice. So I'm just curious overall, what was the process like? What was your approach to studying for that license? And then I'm also curious how you celebrated when you passed.
Yes. So so in this industry, depending on how your firm is structured, you first need some sort of license. And so there's a Series 6, a Series 7, Series 65, there are all these different series, which is an exam you have to take. When you get that, when you pass whatever that criteria is that you need for your industry. So we're a fee-only planner. We don't charge commissions. So I needed a Series 65. That was the one for our industry that is required. And so I did that right when I joined the firm. That was the first thing I actually did when I joined the firm. Once I had that, I was able to give advice and give recommendations and help clients with their money. That's kind of the minimum certification that you need.
Yeah.
And that's an actual license the government has. And then from there, as you grow and expand, one of the things that we do here is we're always trying to learn and always trying to grow. The CFP, the Certified Financial Planner designation, that is kind of it encompasses all those different aspects of the financial plan. And so you have to go through courses similar to a college course. In fact, some colleges can actually have their courses count as credit for the education part of it. And then once you go through the courses, you can then sit for an exam. And then if you pass the exam, then you have to have a certain amount of hours of experience before you're qualified to have this designation. And so I completed all that in, what'd you say, 2019? Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what I saw from my LinkedIn stalking.
Yeah, it's probably right. Seems like a long time ago. What that does is it just helps me have a better, more well-rounded education on all the different financial planning aspects. So I mentioned estate planning. That's part of that. So that's where I got the basis, and it's great. But there's, you're kind of dipping your toe into a big pool of knowledge that is in estate planning. Same with tax planning, right? I have a minor in accounting, and I'm familiar with how accounting works, but I don't know all the ins and outs. So again, that's where an accountant can be very helpful. But this designation is designed to help me ask the right questions and make sure we're at least looking for the best way to help solve those problems with the client. So that designation for me was the way of really showing my knowledge and expertise by being able to pass the exam and the classes and all that.
That's awesome. And then how did you celebrate passing?
I know we had a donut cake, which I'm a huge fan of donuts in general. But here in our town, there's a donut shop that can do giant donuts. So when I say donut cake, have you had one of these, Maddy?
I know. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. So Fort Finley Donuts is the place.
I know.
And you're familiar with that. Best place, best donut place in town.
Yep.
If you've had one of their normal yeast donuts, picture that, but the size of a cake, or actually bigger than that.
My gosh.
Yeah, it feeds probably 15 to 20 people, and it tastes exactly like a donut, but giant.
Yeah. So is it in the shape of a donut too?
It can be shaped any way you want. So for instance, the other day there was one for my birthday. I just turned 40 a little while ago, and they had a big 40 donut cake.
Oh my gosh.
So they can shape it just any way you want.
Yeah.
The other thing, they can fill it with any filling that they have.
Wow.
And they can top it with any toppings they have. So it is incredible. And
that sounds good.
Yes.
That sounds like an appropriate way to celebrate.
It was. And you can tell how passionate I am about donuts.
Yeah. Fort Finley truly is the best. I can agree with that one.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask a question kind of about goal setting. So I think, to me, goal setting in all areas of life are a huge part of continuing to stay motivated and feel purposeful. But when I always think about goals, I think growing up, I always just thought about like in my personal life. But I feel like recently I've been really challenged to make goals for my career too, and my professional life too.
Yes.
So I was curious, what is one goal you have in your career going forward still to come?
Yeah. So the one goal I was able to achieve last year in 2022. I became a partner of the firm. And so that was an awesome experience. I'm so thankful for Adam and Tony for giving me that opportunity. And so that was kind of what I've been working for the first 8 years of my career, is to get to that point where I had that opportunity. And so I think now what I'm targeting is, as a result, I've taken on 2 roles. So now I'm the chief compliance officer. So if you want to put your listeners to sleep, because I avoid this conversation a lot on our podcast, is when you talk compliance, no one really likes talking compliance. Now, I am a person who's a rule follower. So to me, some of this stuff is enjoyable to learn and do. But that's one role I do. But the other one is I'm the director of our wealth management team. Okay. And so that's a fun title. All it means is, of the 5 advisors, my role is to make sure that we're constantly growing and understanding any new laws or changes that happen. And so it's my job to oversee that team of advisors and make sure they're all equipped to be the best they can be. And so when I look forward, is I want to, in the next 3-5 years, be able to have a team that is looked at as experts. I want the advisors here, when people are online or wherever they look, we're considered like a go-to for that. And we have some great advisors here, and they do awesome stuff. So I just really have to get out of their way and let them do that. But anything I can do to provide them with that support or help is what my next handful of years is for, and kind of coming up with processes, because a lot of what we do, if you can have a process, it speeds things up. You don't have to reinvent everything every time you do it, because every client is unique. But some of the things you do, if you've done it once, you already have a framework to help you. It saves time, especially for the new advisors coming in. They don't have to spend all this time rethinking the things that work. And so if I can help them come up with those processes and give a nice structure, it'll give them more time to spend with clients and do the things that they like to do.
Yeah, well, that's great. I feel like I can even give a little testimony. Jess, who works in your office, is my financial advisor, and I feel so confident working with her. Like, she gives me such great advice and like really practical stuff to do. You know, me being young in my career, and I am very thankful for her. So you guys at Hicks and Zerker do a great job.
Well, thank you. She does a great job.
Yes. So I have two more questions for you. So second to last is, when you look back at your career, what is one of the biggest challenges you faced and what got you through it?
I don't even know if I'll call it challenge, but one of the biggest changes was that career change from being at that nonprofit and then moving to Hicks and Zerker. I loved what I was doing there. And it wasn't that I was looking to leave because I was tired or there was something that happened or wrong or anything like that. Like, you hear some people switch because this company is not what it was before. I don't want to be there. Right. That wasn't it. But I just felt a calling that there was some skills and talents that I had that maybe I wasn't using all of them to the full extent that I could or should be doing. And from my faith background, that it was challenging to me that if I was given these gifts, maybe I need to make sure I'm utilizing some of those things. And again, you kind of go back to, when you're good at something, sometimes you take it for granted that maybe not everybody can do that. And so, to think, well, that's fine, somebody else can do that. But if I have those skills, maybe I should be making sure I'm utilizing those to the best of my ability. And so it was coming with terms with that of not leaving that ministry, but switching to something new that will also provide value and help people, but just from a different standpoint. So I think it was just a hard transition as I was making that, because that was something I was, again, very passionate about and still am, to not say that I'm leaving that, but I'm just entering a new phase of helping people in a different way. It was a struggle for a little while on getting comfortable with that. And then I got the opportunity a couple years down the road to join the board here locally, help me then reconnect and still be involved in it, but just in a different way. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's a cool connection. And I'm sure you learned so much from that. And even people maybe going through a transition can feel encouraged by that story.
Yeah.
My final question is actually a question I end all of my interviews with. I almost want to say selfishly, but I know that it helps other people too, because I love hearing people's advice coming from where they are. So I'm curious what your advice is for someone wanting to pursue a career that is similar to yours, or just pursue their career in such a way that you did. What is just your advice for people?
Yeah. So if people are looking to be a financial advisor, and I know Austin will talk about the other end from a financial analyst standpoint, but from a financial advisor standpoint, there's a couple different things. What you major in, it could be business, could be accounting. There's all of the different kind of aspects of business that work, because you do a lot of different things as an advisor. But there are some schools that are actually accredited for that certified financial planner, the CFP, that your classes give you that education requirement already fulfilled. So if you're looking and you want to be an advisor and you may want to pursue that degree down the road, looking for a university that has that accreditation already would be helpful. But in general, the thing you need to do, and this is true across the board, I don't care what you're going into, is find the opportunity to shadow or observe that career so that you really know if that's something you'd be interested in. Because you may think this is what the job is, but when you go and watch and observe, there's maybe other aspects that you didn't know about that aren't as appealing to you. And it may cause you to choose a different career, and you'll be happier by not having to have wasted all that time preparing for something that you may not really enjoy. So internships, shadowing, all those things are great to learn exactly what it is you would be doing in that full time, and then help you decide if that's actually what you really like to do. I think you should do that. But I also think do some internships on things around that career, because there may be something that you didn't actually know about that is even better. So, from Austin and I, research versus financial planning, if you would have asked me, I wouldn't have known what the difference were. But if I would have been able to intern and seen both of those, it would have helped me decide, this is the one I actually like better than the other one. So don't just intern on the one thing you like, but look at some internships around that type of career you want to do and see what all it entails.
Yeah. That's great advice. And I feel like you were almost shouting me out because I feel that way about when I interned with you guys. Like I knew nothing about podcasting. And through my internship at Higgs and Zerker, I just like fell in love with podcasting. And so that's gotten me to, today I have my own podcast and I do a podcast at work and I'm like freelance editing and stuff. And I never would have thought that if I didn't have the opportunity to do that through my internship. So that truly
you're
is
welcome.
Great advice. Yes. So thank you. But thank you so much, Josh, for getting to share your story and your career path and your advice, because those are valuable things that people can learn from.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple ways you connect with both of us. Austin, why don't you tell everybody how they can connect with Maddy?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love it if they went to maddymiller.co and maybe in the future, maddymiller.com. I mean, we were just talking about the domain. It could be available. We'll see. But maddymiller.co, check out her website. Follow her on Instagram at The Maddy Miller Show. And like and subscribe, leave a positive review because I'm sure that you loved these episodes. She just is a gem and we love working with her.
Wow, that was so nice. Thank you so much for that shout out. And I, of course, want to shout out my very own favorite podcast because it is truly the roots of all of my podcast skills, the Invested Dads podcast. So you can visit theinvesteddads.com where you'll find all of their episodes, plus a really helpful transcript and show notes to accommodate each episode. Plus, you should follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you enjoy their episodes, which most people do, you should leave them a review. Plus, if you like timely updates on all their episodes, follow them on social media and subscribe to their weekly newsletter, which all of this that we just mentioned will be linked in the description below. So you'll be able to find it there. But thank you guys so much for having me join the Invested Dads.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And until next Thursday,
we'll see you there.
Adios.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Higgs and Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Higgs and Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Higgs and Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.